In this video, I'm taking a look at fundamentals for energy markets, and as you can see, I am on the internet. The EIA.gov site is the U.S. Energy Information Administration, and it gives official announcements in the United States as to various energy markets. Now, it's going to be all energy, so it's coal, nat gas, oil, etc. Typically, for most of you, this is going to mean you're interested in oil or natural gas. On the website, you can see there's plenty of information. They happen to be talking about non-powered dams um, converted to hydroelectric dams in 2016. So, not necessarily something that you can trade upon directly in the commodities markets, but there are quite a bit of information points that you can get from this website. So, for example, you can go to the petroleum and other liquids, and it will give you plenty of information about what's going on in the world of petroleum. You can see recent analysis and projections, and this week in petroleum, you click on that, and it gives you an idea of what's going on in petroleum overall. This actually drills down to propane, distillates, gasoline, and crude oil. So I'll click on crude oil. And you can see the average price of contract prices, how it has been driving lower lately. Crude oil stocks, millions of barrels, and days supply. This is the U.S. You can see that it is very high, so that doesn't tend to lift pricing. You have to keep in mind that it's a supply and demand question, and at this point in time, you have to think that the supply and demand question favors a little softer prices as we get more and more petroleum. So with this, you can also look at crude reserves and production and recognize that there are quite a few different announcements. Gulf of Mexico federal offshore production gives you an idea of what they're doing in Mexico. And it has a massive effect on what goes on in the oil markets. In fact, this is by far the largest source of data. There are other factors that can affect crude oil or natural gas. Specifically, crude oil recently, in the last couple decades, have had disruptions due to the Iraqi wars, where Iraq and its oil fields were offline. That causes a little bit of a supply disruption and, of course, tends to cause a spike in oil prices. Overall, though, what you need to glean from this is the supply and demand picture, where the trends are going, because remember, most traders are trying to project forward. You also can look for natural gas, numbers and data on this site, and you can see that you can even get into quite a bit of variance. Some people will trade gasoline that is, and you can find information on this site as well. Again, though, much like crude oil, it's all about supply and demand. You need to find you need to look into refining and processing, and it'll tell you how much was input into the refineries, how much they produced, in oil, and of course in natural gas. And typically, these announcements are what moves the market by far the most. When you get these announcements weekly, a lot of times the oil market will suddenly take off or fall apart in one direction or the other. You need to be aware of the fact that sometimes distillates or for example, jet fuel, there's an extreme undersupply of jet fuel. Well, that should drive up petroleum markets because more will be needed as it's distilled into that marketplace. And with that, you can find everything at the EIA that you need, because although there are other announcements out there and other websites from other countries, by far the EIA is the biggest mover of markets.